That day, I was riding in a car driven by my friend Satoshi to an abandoned village deep in the mountains on the border of the prefecture. There were 3 of us, as usual. Satoshi was the driver and I was the passenger. The other person occupying the back seat was Koki. We left the town around 10 a.m., and it was now past 2 p.m., with a lunch break on the way. It was now past 2 o'clock, and we had about an hour to go before we reached our destination, an abandoned village. The car was now making a gentle ascent along the river at a leisurely pace. I looked down again at the map I had open. The abandoned village we are going to is no longer on the map, and the place marked with red pens is our destination. The contour lines are quite narrow. That's how remote it is. Suddenly, I hear a light snore from the back seat. I think about this every time I go to, how can this guy use someone as a stepping stone, yet sleep comfortably alone in the back? Once he looked in the rearview mirror, Satoshi said in a tone of dismay rather than discomfort. It was Koki who planned today's one-day tour of this abandoned village. I heard that there is a mysterious well in this abandoned village. Yesterday at the university cafeteria, Koki told Satoshi and me with a boyish gleam in his eyes that he is a genuine occult enthusiast. Koki is a genuine occult enthusiast. Satoshi and I have been to such spots many times before under his guidance. Of course, there have been many disappointments, but occasionally we have had a bite. Koki gets carsick easily. Isn't it better than him throwing up in the car? He said, "Hey, Koki's drooling." According to Koki's story, there is a well in that abandoned village that is usually dry, but fills with water only on new moon nights. It is said that at the bottom of the well lies the corpse of a dead Kappa. It is said that if a person can drink the water from the well, his/her lifespan will be extended by 50 years. The well where the Kappa sleeps, I muttered to myself, and Satoshi gave a sigh of relief as if to add to it. I was thinking, oh, by the way, Kappa meat can make you immortal if you eat it, Oh, I don't know if you are confusing it with mermaid meat. I don't know if you are confusing it with mermaid meat, but there are some legends about it. There are still many stories about Kappa. They are widely distributed monsters, so there are many variations in the stories. I let the second half of Satoshi's story slide by and wondered if the water in the well was infused with Kappa broth, or something like that, as I looked out the window. Was I right or wrong this time? Whatever the case may be, since I am going all the way there, I would like to bring back at least an interesting souvenir story. By the way, I can't see the moon this evening. Satoshi. If there was water in the well, would you drink it? I wouldn't drink it. Let's put aside the issue of life expectancy. I don't know what's in the water from an unmanaged well. That's right. Neither Satoshi nor I had any intention of doing so. However, only one of us, Koki, who was sleeping in the back of the room, seemed to be ready to drink. He even brought his favorite cup of coffee, a stick of sugar, and instant coffee. He even brought his favorite cup of coffee, a stick of sugar, and instant coffee. Hey, Koki! Satoshi yelled at him in the rearview mirror. Still, the man himself is just leaning back in his seat and sleeping comfortably. He must be dreaming of an occultist's delight. Satoshi stops the car and wakes Koki up. An hour and a half later. The road became narrower and rougher as we went on, and I, being a worrier, became a little anxious. I began to wonder if this map I had was really accurate. We finally arrived at our destination, an abandoned village, passing a small hall with a lot of Jizo statues. We finally arrived at our destination, an abandoned village. Here. Koki gets out of the car and shouts loudly. Although the village was abandoned, it still retained its original form. There were several abandoned houses standing side by side and up and down, as if clinging to the slopes of the mountain. The wooden houses themselves, however, were also decayed and battered that they looked as if they could be kicked over. The grass was knee-high, and it was hard to tell where the road had once been unless one looked closely. A small river flowed below the village, and beyond it was another mountain. It would be more apt to call it a wall of overgrown greenery. "Hey! You guys, this way, this way." I heard Koki's voice. I was standing by the parked car, looking around blankly, when I suddenly came to myself and headed toward Koki. Satoshi, who was the last to get out of the car, followed me. Koki was standing at the edge of the village, almost in the middle of the forest. "Kappa Wells." Koki pointed to it. The well, which Koki called a well, was made of stone and was square in shape, about 70 centimeters on each side. It had a stone lid on top. It had neither a roof nor a wall. When I heard the word well, I had imagined something a little more imposing, and was frankly disappointed. However, I guessed that most of the wells in old villages were like this. "Hey, you guys, give me a hand. I'll open the lid." Satoshi and I were reluctant, but we joined forces and opened the lid together. It was very heavy. As soon as we shifted the lid, a cold air caressed our cheeks, just like when you open a refrigerator. A dark, deep hole opened up. A vertical hole in the ground. When I looked into it, I felt a caterpillar crawling around my neck. Whoa! It was Koki who suddenly shouted into the hole. His voice reflected off the inner wall of the well and came back in layers. Next, Koki threw a stone that had fallen to the ground. A slight sound. It indicated that there was no water in this well. "It's running dry," Satoshi said. The three of us looked at each other in silence. Koki took a flashlight from his backpack. He shined it into the well. The light did not illuminate the bottom of the well. Was the light weak? But it seemed that the well had been dug quite deep. Of course, there was no sign of the Kappa that was said to sleep here. "I can't see a thing. At the very least, it looks to be at least 30 meters deep." I thought it was a shallow well, but maybe it is not. After saying this, Satoshi picked up a stone on the ground, as if he was going to throw it in again. Then he looked at the stone in his hand as if he suddenly realized something, and turned toward Koki without throwing it in after all. "So? What are you going to do now?" Koki replied cheerfully, "Oh." Koki answered cheerfully, "Oh, of course. According to the story, water comes to this well on the night of the new moon. The water in this well doesn't start to flow until after the moon rises. Let's wait until then." In other words, waiting. Koki's words were what I had expected. I groaned and looked around. An abandoned village. Waiting here until dark is a horrifying and fun thing to do. If I were alone, I would definitely refrain from doing so. We decided to go back to the car for the time being. I checked the time and found that it was 4:30 p.m. Koki had successfully brought playing cards and so on, so we chose a place where there was as little grass as possible. We played poker with a car sunshade attached to the windshield as a mat. Koki came out on top. Next, we played Indian poker. The result was that Satoshi came out on top by a landslide. In the end, I didn't win any poker games. By the way, about that well. That was when we stopped playing poker and the three of us were playing Millionaire. Satoshi opened his mouth. It was in a casual tone, as if he were talking to himself. The Kappa part was, "What the hell is that all about?" After it was his turn to discard his card, Koki asked, "Oh. Are you asking me?" I asked him. "You're the only one who knows," said Satoshi. "You're the only one who knows," Satoshi says. Koki starts talking. "A long time ago, a couple living in this village found a Kappa in the river there. The husband hit the Kappa from behind with a stick and carried it back to the village." "A Kappa? Why?" Koki laughed at my question. "He wants to eat you." "Really?" Kappa were believed to have the power of immortality. I don't know if it was because they were hungry or not. When he was about to eat it, the Kappa noticed and ran away. Naturally, I chased after it. The Kappa ran away. And the Kappa ran into a well. What a pity. Then the villagers covered the well. The Kappa kept screaming in the well for 3 days and 3 nights. Then, on the 4th night of the new moon, the Kappa stopped screaming. The cries stopped. The Kappa had gone to its death. The well is not directly connected to the underground water vein. No matter how good a swimmer the Kappa was, he would have been helpless without a way out. I heard that the well ran dry afterwards. The well ran dry after that. But strangely enough, water springs up only at the time of the new moon. Kappa water. I heard this from an old man who lives in a neighboring village. I've heard it from someone else. Revolution. Oh, no. And so we passed the time playing cards, chatting, and chasing away the insects that kept coming by. And before we knew it, it was getting dark. The rest came quickly. After a few minutes, the night had permeated the surroundings to the point that we could no longer clearly recognize the playing cards. The mountains at night are dark. Nothing could be seen. Insects, birdsong, the rustling of leaves. There was no moon in the sky. A light comes on. Koki pulls a camping gas lantern out of his bag and turns it on. Let's go. Both Satoshi and I took our own flashlights and headed for the village well. All 3 of us were silent. Somehow, the atmosphere was different from when the sun was shining. It was dark. It was dark anyway. I wondered if it was possible for things to change like this. I felt a sense of discomfort, almost fear. The light of the light illuminates. A well. The lid is open. I look around. It is dark, as if the darkness in the well has blown out and enveloped the area. Is there really water? Koki shouts loudly on purpose beside the well, perhaps trying to liven up the atmosphere. I laugh a little. I felt a little more at ease. Then. There is a stone here. I'm going to throw it in to see if it works. The last year. Koki threw the stone into the well. Eh? Reflexively, I had raised my voice. I heard a sound. It was the reply from the thing at the bottom of the well. There is water in the well now. It certainly wasn't there during the day. Water, there is. Wow, seriously? Wow. I froze. Even the person who threw the stone, Koki, was surprised. Satoshi, who was supposed to be the calmest of the 3 of us, looked down at the result and started mumbling something. I'm scared of Satoshi. Tides have nothing to do with, a new moon doesn't have enough effect to push up the surface of underground water, and there are no oceans or lakes in this area. The Earth's rotation has accelerated? Ha, that's absurd. But then. I looked at Satoshi. The first thing to do is to look at the water. I've had water from the very beginning. After saying this, Satoshi picked up 2 stones that had fallen to the ground and held them above the well with his hands. But before you can question what he's going to do, he drops one of the stones. The sound of falling into the water. Satoshi quickly shifted his hand and dropped the second one. But no sound of water was heard. This is different. It sounds different. What is it? What does this mean? What did Satoshi do? It's probably just a pile of rocks or something hard, piling up and peeking out of the water. Satoshi said to my stunned face. When Koki threw the stone during the day, it just happened to fall on the hard stuff. It was too deep to see inside. I stopped checking after the first time because I had already been informed that it was already dead. I didn't know what was going on anymore. The only thing that comes to mind is that Satoshi is ridiculously calm in a situation like this. Ha, what can I say? I don't know how you can think that far ahead. I said those words because I was really impressed. I am sure that Koki must have felt the same way, but Satoshi had an unflattering look on his face. I didn't want you to get hit. What? What? Hey, Koki. Satoshi didn't answer my question, but called Koki. You got a lot of stuff in that bag, don't you? You got a rope, a bucket, nothing? I said, yeah, I do. You told me in advance that you didn't have a pickaxe. What? You got it? Yeah. Koki takes a small plastic bucket and a thin rope from his bag. Satoshi took the bucket, wrapped the rope around the handle of the bucket without saying a word, and gripped the end of the rope firmly. He then throws the bucket into the well. The bucket falls on the water. What is it, Satoshi? What did you mean earlier when you said you didn't want it to hit? Koki asked Satoshi again on my behalf. He is wiggling the rope in his hand. He is scooping water into the bucket. Suddenly, Satoshi pulls the rope with a big yank. At that moment, from inside the well, something made a sound. It sounded like a castle made of building blocks collapsing. It was the sound of something piled up collapsing from the bottom. Satoshi slowly pulls the rope. I'd like to know what you think of the Kappa story that Koki told me earlier. If that's true. What? I was not prepared for this, so I was making strange noises. The story of the Kappa is true. It was a story that the water in the well dried up because a Kappa had entered the well. The Kappa is blamed for the well drying up. That makes sense. I still did not understand what Satoshi was trying to say. But the well actually still works. We have water, and we can draw it this way. Even if it can't be used for drinking water, it can be used for sowing in the field, washing clothes, and washing dishes. There are many uses. The people of this village went to the trouble of creating the story of the Kappa, and wanted to make the supposedly usable wells dry. Satoshi pulls the rope. I only followed the movement with my eyes. Even if there is water, we can't use it. This water is useless. The bucket came up to the edge of the well. Satoshi grabbed it. Inside the yellow bucket is crystal clear water. And one more thing. What is it? A long, thin stone? I never thought I'd catch something like that. Satoshi's words were laced with a wry smile. You guys know what this is? I don't know. Both of us shook our heads. Satoshi took it out of the bucket. Took it out of the bucket. It looks like it has a human shape. However, it has no head or face. It looks like a bowling pin. Satoshi then put his hand in his pocket and pulled something out. It was also a stone. A round stone. Satoshi slowly placed the round stone on top of the long, thin stone. When illuminated by the light, the round stone had an expression. In other words, a face. Have you ever heard of the Kappa, a metaphor for a child who was once thinned out due to poverty? What on earth is Satoshi talking about? The child who has been so thinned out is called a water baby. I felt as if I were being stroked by a lukewarm cold. The eyes go to the well. I wonder if something is crawling up from that well at any moment. You may not understand, but there is a child clinging to you here. Satoshi holds the foot of the Jizo in his hand. It is true that the foot of the Jizo in S's hand is small and raised. Is that a child? This is a Jizo for water children. It is a Jizo to offer offerings to water children. It was in the well. Can you see? He crawls up from the well. Something? What? Water children, thinned out children. Children? Why do I think that? This is not a well. It's a grave. Maybe he's not alone. A common grave. I remember the story of the Kappa. They were there to eat. Not directly, but to feed themselves, I suppose. Satoshi then took a bucket and offered it to Koki. Want a drink? It may be water of longevity in a way. After all, it's a water baby. It's full of the broth of children who were supposed to live for decades to come. Koki half smiled and shook his head. I wouldn't drink it. Well, you're right. What about you? Do you want a drink? Saying that, Satoshi offers me a bucket as well. I can't. Then Satoshi giggled and put the bucket of water back into the well. And that was also the signal for the end of the game. We closed the lid, and placed the headless Suiko Jizo on top of the bucket. The three of us joined hands. As we left the village in Satoshi's car, I noticed for the first time that there was a temple near the entrance to the village. There was a temple near the entrance of the village and many Jizo statues lined up there. As we passed by, Satoshi said something to me. "Those are all Mizuko Jizo, too." At that moment, I was awestruck. I was scared. Oh, I was scared. More than ghosts, more than monsters, more than darkness, more than anything else. Humans are afraid. The car is quiet and still. The only sound is Satoshi's absent voice. Even Koki doesn't speak. "Sorry. It's a joke." After a pause, Satoshi said, "I'm sorry, it's a joke." I heard it, but I didn't respond. "It's a joke." He said it more strongly than before, and I finally reacted. "What about all jokes?" "All jokes. Jordan. It's all in my mouth. I don't know what it means." I look at Satoshi. Satoshi glances at me and smiles, as if he is laughing at me. "I'm sorry. I didn't think you would believe me that easily. When I pulled up the bucket from the well, I found a stone of just the right shape, and I got carried away. Then I didn't know when to quit. Day. That's absurd. Joke, you know, about Kappa, or water children. There is a story that the Kappa is a metaphor for a child who has been thinned out. But think about it. If the villagers really did such a thing, why do they use their sin, or shame, as a metaphor? Why go to the trouble of using shame as a metaphor to tell people about it? I said, well, not everyone understands, or had feelings of remorse, or, well, I get it, and that Kappa story tells me we have regrets. Well, it is possible that the villagers at the time did not know that such a metaphor existed and that the story was really told by accident. Even if that is the case, there is no child buried in that well. How do you know that? It's simple. Because they can't make a living. Is that, there are few rural villages deep in the mountains that depend on wells. There are many other sources of water. But if they had to dig such a deep well, it was because they really needed that well. No one would be stupid enough to throw their kids in a well like that. There are plenty of other places to dump them. But, that water baby Jizo is at, that's a lie. That is just a stone. The shape is totally different. The one at the entrance of the village is just a Jizo. The water in the well it is possible for a well to run dry and then spring back up again. I looked at the back seat to ask Koki for help. He was sleeping. I thought he was too quiet. Damn, he's useless. Satoshi said, don't tell Koki. Let him be a little quieter. I let my mind wander once more. I had been deceived. It was the most beautiful, the most magnificent trick ever. However, I felt like I was saved from the bottom of the earth. Of course, I have a feeling of saying son of a bitch, and it's rising up in me. But more than that, I feel it from the bottom of my heart. I'm glad it was a joke. Since Satoshi said it was a joke, it must have been. I decided to think so. So I decided not to care why the lid of the well was made of heavy stone. So I decided not to worry about the fact that Satoshi's expression was gentler than usual. I suddenly remembered, I decided not to ask Satoshi about the little tooth-like thing I saw when he offered me that bucket, which was in there with the water. It was all a joke. This concludes this story. Thank you for listening to the end.